event-filled meeting unless...
Okay, good evening. We will call the Thursday, May 24th meeting of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee to order at 7:06. We'll start over on the right with our introductions.
Brian Burke. Patrick Sweeney.
Lynn Betteridge.
Mike Mitchell.
Don Smith.
Lisa Norman.
And Scott Archer, staff.
Okay. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the April 26th meeting. Everybody get a chance to review those.
Yes.
And any additions or corrections? No? Somebody care to make a motion to...
I move
Accept
that
them.
we accept the minutes as written.
I'll second it.
Okay. Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Cruising right along. Citizen comments and issues and items not on the agenda, and there are no citizens present, so we'll cruise past that one and go to general business. 4A, dog park. I don't have anything to report, and Scott, I don't know if there's anything in generalities that you can talk about in open meeting, or...
A little bit. We may want to, depending on where things progress, we might want to schedule an executive session meeting with the committee, which is just some of you may know this, but executive session is when you're discussing real estate transactions, or there are a few things that the state open meetings law gives you as a city the right to meet in a private meeting without the public present. And typically you'd want to do that when you're discussing a potential real estate transaction before it gets to the point where you're talking about making a final agreement or something like that. So we might want to do that. That's just a little kind of background on that. But we do have a one of the property areas that we've discussed that is in private ownership that we've been looking at for a while. You might be able to guess which one it is. I'm not going to say it, but you can talk to me offline as well when we're done with the meeting if you're interested specifically. I've met with the owner or representative of the owner of that property and kind of exploring some land use issues and what that might entail if we were going to try to do something, whether temporarily or permanently or what have you. So there's been some progress on a specific property. It's very much in the preliminary stages of discussion. Depending on what happens between now and the next committee meeting, I'll keep you posted. I'll work with Mike as the chair to schedule an executive session either right before or right after the regular meeting if we want to get into some specific details about that. And I think that's really about all I would have to report. I know we've been, we've talked about maybe considering doing something when we talk about the one of the future park sites that we've got that we're going to be master planning of maybe incorporating a dog park into that or something. And that's already a park site, so we can talk about that openly in the meetings. But that's about it.
Okay. Anything from anybody else on that topic? I don't have anything to add at this point. Okay, so we'll move on. Annual report to the City Commission. Brian, a year ago at one of the May Commission meetings, made a presentation to the City Commission. I just gave you, and I apologize for not getting this to you ahead of time, but these are very rough notes that I started, and then I did meet with Brian, and I thank him for that. He's excused tonight for a family activity. But as you look at this list, the sections that you'll see that are in all caps, that was Brian's additions after he and I met, and I wrote up some notes. But basically, what I plan to do, and I'd kind of like to go through this not in huge detail, but I do want to get everybody's opinion so that I can go and be confident that I'm speaking for the whole group. I was going to start by just a little bit of information about PRAC, the fact that we have a full board of 9 members and a nice variety of interests and so forth. And then talk about accomplishments in the park system and recreation over the past year. There's a few of them listed there, and Scott has given me quite a list today of additional things. One of the major ones that I forgot was, or two, the Sportcraft boat ramp and the Carnegie State Park reopening, along with the Kenema Playground dedication, the stuff that the high school construction class has done at Wesley Lynn, the Singer Hills project, and the Lee Kelly sculpture. And then I've got a list of items that have been refurbished at Pioneer Center, refurbished and upgraded, and also at the pool. And then getting into our goals, not in any particular order. One of the things that Brian pointed out, and I'll try to emphasize, is that really in all cases, all of our objectives line up with the goals. I think everybody's seen that little brochure of the Commission's goals for this year. And everything that we've talked about working on fits into at least one of those. All of them have to do with the livability goal, which is their goal 4. But then there's also that have to do with economic impacts and so forth. So we'll talk about Wesley Lynn Park Phase 2, and also the fact that the high school class is basically doing Phase 1.5 and using Metro enhancement grants for that, and we certainly support that. And pipe up anywhere in here. Any suggestions or additions of the things that I missed, please. Determining future plans for the RV park, and again, we'll talk about what the high school class is going to be doing this year and the fact that they want to be part of the master planning process, and how we feel that while some upgrades might be expensive, it is a revenue generator and can enhance revenues, and the fact that the RV park is a fairly unique facility in such a close-in location. So we'll hit that one. Talk about the master planning process for Glen Oak and Filbert Run, and I'll just mention the fact that for cost-saving reasons, we'll do both. The plan is to do both plans at the same time, but the Glen Oak would be the primary, would be the most urgent one for development, ultimately. Investigate and pursue a dog park. Really about the only thing to mention there, and Scott, I got a note in there to ask you about, do I even want to mention the fact that we're having very preliminary discussions with a private property owner, or would I just...
I think you could say it like that, yeah.
Okay.
That would be appropriate.
Okay, so we'll keep that in very vague mention, but basically talk about the fact that this is a big project, and we certainly don't want to try to shoehorn something in that's not going to be year-round usable, or that's going to become a maintenance issue more than any dog park is going to be, a maintenance issue to some degree. We don't want to create a mud hole and cause a real problem. But we still feel that this is a major goal and an amenity that our community wants. Excuse me. Talk about the trail linkages and standardized signing, and what we've talked about several times, having that natural, urban, historical trail all the way from Clackamas River Trail all the way up through Old Town on up the hill, either by the elevator or Singer Falls, which are both a pretty unique deal, on up to the Carnegie Center and beyond. And Brian has a good term for that. He talks about that as being kind of the center of gravity for the city. So we'll talk about that one. We'll work with the city in determining the use of the end of the Oregon Trail Interpreter Center. Not a lot to say there. Continue to support the Singer Falls project, and I'll try to get a little bit of an update from the Rotary Club. Scott, I'll have to try to get a contact person from you to see what their next step is, that sort of thing. And then I was going to talk about some other things that are not specifically on our goals, but that are things that we discuss and are aware of that are issues. One is supporting the concept of a parks maintenance fee. There's political timing issues there, but we do support the concept and want to be a part of that planning. Some facility issues, the end of the Oregon Trail Center, Ermitinger House, ongoing issues at the pool, and possible expansion of the Pioneer Center. Just to kind of keep those on their radar. I'm sure they already are anyway. And then I want to make sure on these next two that I've got buy-in to talk about them from everybody. One of them you've heard, but the other I think is kind of new. First being the Parks Open House Day to kick off the season next year, and hopefully have a social media component or components on that. Everybody agreeable that is something we want to present to the commission? Okay. And the other thing, this is something that really I think Don got me started thinking about. But it's good. It's good. You don't have to. And that is the idea that the city has all of these advisory committees, but we all kind of operate in a vacuum and are doing our own thing, but a lot of the projects impact one another. So if PrAC agrees, I'd like to present it as a proposal from PrAC that there be some sort of once-a-year summit meeting of all of the various committees to discuss what all of the group's goals are. Because I think we might be surprised to find out that, hey, there's some other people, the historical committee or the downtown Oregon City committee that are working on things that impact what we're doing, or we're doing things that impact them. So,
Yeah, sounds like a great idea.
yeah, okay.
It's very good.
Okay, all right. So we'll put that on there. Oh, the other thing I was going to ask, should we, since we're talking about our goals, that the Parks Open House one, should we make that number 8 on our list as an official goal?
And you're thinking for doing that for next year?
Yes, about a year, basically
So we
a year
have
from
planning,
now.
yeah.
Early June, whenever the weather decide, well.
After the
can't
Rose
do
Festival.
that.
July's Parks and Rec month, I think I saw an email.
Exactly. That's a great point. yeah.
Okay, so early July.
We,
And the
on
planning,
that-
we'd want to start in 2012, even though the event would happen in 2013. So it would be appropriate on this year's goals if we want to put it there.
That's a great point that Don just made. And we typically do, our commission, our mayor usually does a declaration or a resolution to declare, usually at the first meeting in July every year, there's a kind of a formatted resolution from the National Recreation and Parks Association, which, as you know, we're a member of that. There's a national, July is National Parks and Recreation Month, and it outlines all the great benefits of parks, and I think that would be a really good tie-in to that. Keep that piece in mind. That's a good suggestion.
And that's about the time of the first concerts in the park, too, isn't it? Because that happens on the 4th.
Starts in July,
Yeah, the 4th of July at Clackamas.
Well, we're not doing that event anymore, actually.
Oh, really?
We used to do that, and that used to be a kickoff of our, but no, because of funding stuff, we haven't done that for the last 2 or 3 years now at this point. But we do start our concert series in July. It's late July.
Just after the 4th.
Maybe it's a little bit earlier than I'm thinking, but yeah, it's in July. Mid-July.
Okay. Should we put that one on then as goal 8? Don thought our list was too short, so that would.
It's a very
I
finite
think that's
thing.
yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right, then I'll talk about that one being a goal, a formal goal. And Scott, can you toss that on there?
You got it.
Okay, what's suggestions? What have I forgotten about? What should I not talk about? And Scott, I hopefully maybe you and I can just talk on the phone. I want to make sure that I'm providing them with enough information, but not boring them with things that they heard about 10 times from staff reports or whatever else. So maybe we can talk about that.
But I think on that, I understand what you're saying, and to try to, so that they don't tune out completely, but I think they really appreciate hearing from, the citizen representative. I mean, they do hear from staff a lot, but hearing from the citizens board, and I think it's great to talk about stuff. So I don't think, don't worry about feeling too apprehensive about giving them information, even if they've heard it before. It's coming from one of their advisory boards is a good thing, I think.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I'd be happy to, if you want to just give me a call sometime or whatever, Mike.
Okay. And then I was going to close by recognizing the work the staff and supervisors and the whole group of employees in the department do at staffing levels that are about half of what comparable cities and comparable amount of facilities have. So they definitely deserve to be recognized, and I thought that'd be a good way to end it.
Can we go back to the part you're talking about where the committees meet?
Mhm.
If you could read your note, that'd be great.
Okay. read it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just gonna-
PrAC supports an annual summit meeting of all city advisory committees. Various committees tend to operate in a vacuum, and we need to make sure that our citizens, Various committees tend to operate in a vacuum while many of their goals and projects impact the work of other committees. It will be helpful to share goals and priorities with one another on a regular basis.
So I almost think that should be a goal. Because when you think about it, recreation for one person might be going to the library, or somebody else might be, be reviewing the history of the city. And, I might ride a bicycle. So I think it is a pretty good idea for the PrAC to try to encompass everybody else's vision, or maybe it's a goal of PrAC to create a venue to facilitate that. And I don't know, putting it on our goal list is appropriate. What do you think, Scott?
That's totally up to you. It's your goal list, so I really support whatever you guys think on that one. It's a new idea as far as I know, and I think it's a neat idea. I don't know how it's going to be received by the city commission and possibly other groups or other boards, but as far as you making it one of your goals to encourage that or try to be part of that's totally up to you.
I think if we are going to be successful, maximize our effectiveness, we'd want to be fully aware, like yours articulated really well, of what everybody else is up to. Because if we can incorporate what they're doing, our chances of success and then even having, something substantial happen would be multiplied. Okay.
That's a good point.
Okay. So then number 9 would be we support or pursue the idea of an annual, okay.
Do you want me to add that to your
Yes.
goals?
You got number 10? You're on a roll.
I feel like I just
Even
put
10.
one back on the list. Thank you.
It's good. I like how you tie it into the city's goals. I think or the commission's goals. I think that just is important and shows that we're connected with them and not working on our own.
Do you have a suggestion how to word that in a kind of like a one? I mean, because this on here is a pretty lengthy statement. The goals is kind of each one of them is kind of a quick bullet statement. Do you have a suggestion on how you want to word that on there so I can try to capture your? Or do you want me to just take a stab at it?
That first sentence, maybe.
Let me think about that while we're moving forward. I'll take a couple notes.
Do you have a suggestion on how to
Okay.
word that?
Yeah.
We can bring it back at the next meeting to kind of confirm that how it's worded and updated and all that is good. But
Oh, as far as updating the goals.
right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Because we don't have another meeting until, we don't meet again until after I'll make this presentation.
Correct.
But, so we'll figure out how to get it
Right.
worded as a goal.
Yeah, I'm not talking about your presentation. I'm sorry. Because
Okay.
you're
Under the
suggesting putting that as a goal on PrAC goals. Yeah, no, I didn't mean it in terms of your presentation, Mike.
And if you think of anything else, the roster deal that everybody has my email on it. I spend all day on email, so it's open. It's open all the time at work, so that's the quickest way to get a hold of me. So if you have any other suggestions, please pass them on. Anything else on that topic? Okay. End of the Oregon Trail site.
Okay, I've got a little update for you on that. So let's see. We talked about this a little bit at our last committee meeting. The city commission had on its work session on May 8th, just recently. We basically did an update and kind of reviewed information about the end of the Oregon Trail site. I won't go back through all the stuff again. I've sent you all I think I resent the report, the 2010 visioning report for those that didn't have it or wanted it. Does everybody have a copy of that wants it? Do you know what I'm talking about? Not sure. Okay. So if you don't have that and you want it, you can either go to the city website and grab it, or you can just ask me to email it to you. So we referred back to that and kind of talked about some of the major goals in that. and talked about the fact that the Clackamas Heritage Partners, which is the organization that previously worked with the city on managing the end of the Oregon Trail site, they still have a presence there because they, through a contract with the county, because it's a visitor's site through tourism dollars, they operate the Visitors Information Center on site. So even though the center has been closed, the interpretive center has been closed, the Visitors Information Center has remained open for the last couple of years. And they have basically, as an organization, they're a 501c3, I believe. I know they're a nonprofit agency. They've kind of revamped their approach to how they operate as an organization. They were pretty staff top heavy, which is probably at least partly what led to some of their financial issues. They really have very little staffing. They're mostly a volunteer organization with a little bit of staff. And they've been working behind the scenes pretty diligently on trying to come up with some ways to propose to basically get some interpretive opportunities and programs and things going again. So they applied for a grant through a private foundation and actually received the first of a few grants that they've applied for. They've been awarded $81,000 to accomplish. The major things that their grant would accomplish is signage improvements, including like interpretive types of things. And I know that we've talked here about some of that again, and I don't want to go back through all that. But for example, the idea of the self-guided interpretation opportunities where you can, either through signage or through your smartphone or something, you'd have a way of doing some self-guided opportunity that doesn't rely on you having to go into a building. It's the end of the Oregon Trail designated site, so there should be some opportunity for just being able to do that. We talked about their grant includes some facility improvements, so they're talking about partnering with the city to help us with some of the deferred maintenance, and then doing additional interpretive programming in the buildings, the three wagon buildings that are closed, and that includes restarting the Bound for Oregon movie in the theater, which if you don't know what that is or haven't had the opportunity, we'll maybe try to come up with a way to get Prac the opportunity to see that. It's basically it's a movie with a lot of narrative and a lot of photographs, and it basically tells the story of the Oregon Trail from the starting point to the destination here, and it's really quite a cool thing. There's a hologram of John McLaughlin, who is the narrator, and so they're looking at restarting that again. That's kind of one of the focal pieces of the interpretive center experience. So this was all discussed with the city commission at this work session, kind of all tied together. There was it was a pretty intense conversation, and a lot of back and forth. The representatives from the Clackamas Heritage Partners were there at the meeting, and essentially, proposing that the commission allow them to go forth and begin to do some of these things with this money. Otherwise, if the commission wasn't supportive, then they would have to say to this granting agency, "We can't take your money." So, from the pretty lengthy conversation that took place, there were a few points of agreement that the city commission arrived at this work session. And I'll just tell you what those are. There were basically five points of agreement. The first was that the commission, I'm speaking from the commission direction here, they would like to prepare for and do some type of event at what's called the OCTA, OCTA, that's Oregon California Trails Association Conference, is going to be in Oregon, and specifically it's going to be in this area in July of 2013. This is a big national trails organization that has their meetings all over the United States every year. They have a big annual conference where people come together and do all kinds of activities and have seminars and tours and things. And that is going to be, it's actually going to be at the Monarch Hotel in Clackamas, but there's going to be some things in Oregon City that are going to tie into that. And so our city commission, in fact, I think I don't know if it's in the written goals, it's one of their sort of sub-goals is to support that event. So the commission has been talking about this for a little while, that they want to support some type of a major event, that while this conference is in the area, they'd like us to do something, and it kind of ties to this, let's get something going again at the end of the Oregon Trail site, and a kind of a culminating event while these folks are in town. So the commission would like us to do some type of an event at that site. Now, just as I'm saying that, this thought just came to me, and I'm just going to talking about the park day. So it's July 2013. I didn't make that connection until just now. So maybe that's something that we think about as well. But we're talking about a pretty big event that the commission actually wants to put some funds towards this. There's details still to be worked out on that. So that's number one. The point of agreement number 2 is that they would like the commission would like Clackamas Heritage Partners to create a board position on their board designated specifically for a representative of the city commission. So there'd be a commission member that would be appointed to the CHP board to basically kind of have some better links of communication and involvement. Number 3, the commission would like to create a Native American presence at that site of some type of interpretation or what have you, and there's been some discussion about how to work with the tribes and come up with something. Number 4, and this is probably really kind of the big part of this, is the meat part of it. Number 4 is that the commission asked us to work towards an agreement that will be drafted and brought back to the commission between the city and Clackamas Heritage Partners for basically to allow them to program in the interpretive buildings. And what they came up with, what their recommendation was, is to do more of a short-term agreement. There's some concerns and some hesitancy based on the history of what had taken place in terms of the CHP kind of having to stop running the center, and there's still some issues there, and maybe a little bit of hard feelings or whatever, or just some concern about can you do this? Talking to CHP, can you do this? And so what the commission asked us to do was put together an agreement that would run from hopefully pretty soon through the end of 2013, and it would be about a year and a half or so, kind of a trial period to ease our way back into this and see how it goes, capture the opportunity to expend these grant funds. CHP has another pretty significant grant submitted to another foundation that they feel pretty confident about, that they're going to know about in the somewhat near future. So there may be some more funds coming in. And then the last part was that staff would work with CHP on using the portion of the grant funds towards the facility improvements to define what the most needed pieces of the facility are. We do have some pretty significant deferred maintenance issues there with those buildings, and there are actually a few things in the interpretive buildings that we need to do before we would reopen those. So we'd be moving pretty quickly. Some basic things like some ADA stuff that needs to be updated a little bit, some handrail things and some minor things like that, all the way up to some issues we've got some leaky roof stuff and some siding that is getting pretty bad that needs to be fixed, and some bigger issues with the facility types of things. So we're going to continue to work with that. In the meantime, the city continues to, the city owns and has the complete control of that site. It's our site. The buildings are ours. The grounds are ours. We are maintaining the grounds. We're paying all the utilities on those buildings, paying all the operational costs for when something needs to be fixed, if the light goes out, we have to go replace it, those types of things. So we're doing all that right now. And we're continuing to do that, and I think that's part of what is different about from when CHP was running the whole operation before, was all of that was on their responsibility list, and that was kind of a difficult burden for them. So the city has taken over that piece for now, anyway, until we're further directed. So that's what's going on. I'm trying to encapsulate what took place in I think a conversation that was like an hour and a half long or something. It was very, intense and ended up being a very good conversation. Took a lot of working around to get to some points of consensus. So that's in a nutshell what the commission has said we would like to proceed with. So we're on the staff end, we're moving pretty quickly towards some of those things to bring them back. The biggest piece, again, is that agreement between the city and CHP to kind of formalize what this means and how it would be, and the stipulation or the parameters of that. Trying to think if there's anything else I should be telling you about that. If you're really interested in that conversation, you could, of course, go back and watch it on the website. It's under the archive videos. But that's where we're at. So the Clackamas Heritage Partners is hoping to begin doing some of this programming sooner than later. Some of it is going to be workload oriented for us on the staff side to get some of these things done and in place. But if everything moves ahead, it could be seeing some action at the interpretive buildings by some point this summer. So that's kind of the long story short with what took place at that work session. If you have specific questions about any pieces of that, I'd be happy to answer those questions for you, because I just gave you the synopsis and not a huge amount of detail.
I just would like a point of clarification. Clackamas Heritage Partners is only involved with this particular site, is that correct? None of the other historical buildings, Ermitanger, Carnegie,
I would say,
Stevens?
yeah, I would say yes, mostly that's true. Museum of the Oregon Territory and the Stevens Crawford are being run by the Clackamas Historical Society, I believe. The city is involved. The Ermitanger House is the city's. There's a few others out there. The McLaughlin Memorial Association, MMA, runs the Rose Farm. The National Parks runs the McLaughlin House and the Barclay House. So actually that was part of, a number of years ago, what kind of led to what Clackamas Heritage Partners is, and that actually what that name was supposed to be is to put all of the heritage things under one umbrella. But that model, at least for that time being, didn't really kind of come together and didn't really come to fruition. But maybe at some point something like that happens again, because we've got probably 4 or 5 different agencies running our heritage sites. And the city's got some involvement, or some at least crossover on pretty much every one of those at some level. So that's something that's been a continuing conversation that, makes sense at some point probably to try to do that. But mostly, Lynn, to be direct to your question, is CHP really scaled back to what they were focused on, which is they really want to try to help the city open back the interpretive center and get the end of the Oregon Trail site back up and going and improved and basically open. That's their focus right now.
Just thinking out loud, and I need somebody who's got a little more history knowledge of that site, but is there a historical connection between that site and the Clackamas River?
Well, everything, historically is connected to the Clackamas and the Willamette Rivers, but I'm not quite sure what you're specifically getting at.
Reason I'm asking, so there's an event around a July 2013 Trails organization. I don't know exactly what the I think the jug handle project is done by then.
2013. I believe so.
And I
believe so.
don't know exactly what the pedestrian situation is through there, but if you think about a loop trail from the Oregon Trail site, past Home Depot, hit the end of the Clackamas River Trail, around, and then, come back the other way, either through downtown or around behind whatever, and end up back at the Oregon Trail site as sort of a loop trail to promote. But and it would make sense. It makes more sense, I guess, if that was historically, if the people had landed at that site and it, went to the river for their water or whatever, or floated to Portland from there or what.
Yeah.
Or,
That's
I don't know.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah.
thinking out loud.
Are you thinking of that in terms of tying it to a specific event, or just an ongoing sort of a trail?
Well, it kind of just ties into that whole trail linkage thing too. I was thinking of it specifically for that OCTA deal, but it really just extends that big historical urban trail thing even more.
Yeah, and there are, and I think you know this, Mike, because you're on the transportation committee, right? And
Not anymore.
oh, okay. Well, anyway, there's some pretty significant pedestrian improvements around that whole 213 Washington area that are being made as part of that project, where there's actually some separated pedestrian walkways off of the roads where you can get around that through that area and so forth, and maybe with some signage up. I don't want to overstep my boundaries of what I do with the city in terms of, but some signage things or whatever. I know there is some of that going on. We could talk about that a little bit
yeah,
more.
I
Yeah,
was
I'm kind of
just-
thinking through as I'm talking here, but yeah.
Well, it just came to me, so. Welcome, Bob. How are you?
Am I late?
No, right on time.
In fact, I was going to mention, Bob, we were just talking about that city commission work session with the end of the Oregon Trail site, and I was going to mention Bob was at that meeting. So I just gave you. So Bob, you missed my discussion about what the outcome of that was, but you did have a PRAC member there. I don't know if you want to give your take on anything or your part of it. I know you just walked in here, Bob. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but that you might have a little different impression of things. I just kind of ran through I don't know if you stayed through the end of that conversation, but they ended up coming to some points of agreement about some direction on that situation there. But anyway, I just want to mention it.
First of all, sorry I'm late. My oldest child is in the hospital, so
Oh, no.
I had to check him out. Rob went to school with Lisa. Anyway, he's doing okay, but that's an excuse, I think.
That certainly is, and it's beyond the call of duty to come here with that going on, so we appreciate it.
Thank you. I thought a lot about that meeting. Going back to the comments I made at this meeting earlier about reading in the newspaper about the plans for the end of the Oregon Trail, and that I was confused about who was supposed to be not in charge, but giving the city commission advice and counsel. And anyway, I sat in that meeting and listened for probably an hour, and it was there seemed to be a lot of tension between the presenter, and I forgot the name of the committee, but you folks probably know. Dan Fowler was presenting, and the commission. And I wondered about that. Obviously, there's a long history between the different factions. And I was thinking at the time that I sure hope that they can come to a reasonable solution where the best thing can happen for that particular site. and we don't get bogged down in bickering between and among people involved. And I'm not sure how it ended, but I listened to the plans that Dan Fowler presented, and to me they sounded like they would be good for the city. You know, the choices are either fix it up or tear it down. I mean, I don't know what other choices there are, and it seems to me we ought to fix it up. And I was thinking of the big Oregon sign above the White Stag sign above the building in downtown Portland, and that is now a symbol of the city of Portland. It's recognized all over. And think of the battles they've had over that sign. You know, who owns it? You know, what do we put on it? And does it belong to the University of Oregon, or just, you know, all those things? But but looking at it now, the people who make decisions, it seems to me, made the right decision, because it's there as a symbol for the city, and it's a very positive symbol as far as I'm concerned. And I think we could have the same kind of a symbol here, you know, the end of the Oregon Trail, and it's symbolized by that particular location. So I'm hopeful that the people involved that make the decisions can see their way to do the right thing, whatever that is. But those are my thoughts, Scott. As I left, obviously I spoke out loud about that newspaper article, not knowing the background, and there were people in the audience that were players in that particular episode. You know, one person, or I guess two on the commission, were sitting out in the audience when I spoke. But I'd probably say the same thing over, you know, wondering who are the people, the groups that give input and make decisions and give advice and so forth. So I hope they do the right thing.
I was just given the kind of the summary report, Bob, and I think you might have left the meeting just as you said. There was some tension in the discussion and so forth, but at the end of that conversation, the commission got to some points of agreement where they did ask us to go forward in working on an agreement, at least kind of a short term, just to work together with Clackamas Heritage Partners is the name of the group that you were talking about. That's Dan Feller is the president. He's president of the board of that. He's just a volunteer board member. They did give us direction to go forth on a drafting an agreement to work towards some of what was discussed, or much of what was discussed at that meeting. So I guess the last part about that is just it's an informational thing for you as the Parks Committee, just to know what's going on at least, and if you have any concerns or issues about that, or any input to provide, you're certainly welcome to do that. I think somewhere along the way somebody was a representative to that issue from PRAC. If maybe it used to be Ted, I believe.
Yeah.
Did we determine that there was somebody else that was going to sort of be keep an eye on that kind of a thing? Or I was thinking we had a conversation. I don't think it's. I mean,
Yeah, and I said I would join you.
there aren't any subcommittee meetings or anything like that going on. So mostly I'll keep you informed, and if you want to attend any of the city commission meetings that are where this is being discussed, but I don't think there's really anything I mean, I'll keep you as informed as you need to be, and I don't think that's really a big issue right now, having a particular representative, but it might be as we continue to move through this, and it's going to be a work in progress. So, but if you had any particular issues or input or what have you, you certainly have the opportunity to provide that tonight, and then I could take that with me as we move forward in this discussion with Clackamas Heritage Partners, with the City Commission, and so forth. Or if you're good with that direction it's going and you want me just to kind of keep you informed and you want to keep tabs on it or what have you, then we can do that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I work in the world of outcomes, and when you're talking about grants and money and maintenance costs and expenses, I just really want to be sure that when we're looking at this one-time cycle of money, that we're not creating a situation where we're going to be back in the same spot again in 5 years, and then really coming up with some strong outcomes of what success looks like for that site, as far as are we making the kind of gains that we want to be making, or are we just kind of spinning our wheels? I'm sure you're thinking about all of that, but it doesn't hurt to restate it.
That's great. Yeah, that was definitely one of the points that was discussed with the commission that night. And I'm not speaking for Clackamas Heritage Partners. I'll just tell you what their response to that type of discussion was. Plus, I've been in conversations with them at the staff level, working through what we've been asked to do by the commission. The CHP's take on that is that the grant funding is for basically getting things started. It's for some physical things. There's some startup costs on the Bound for Oregon movie that are like a one-time cost just to get it re-going. The building stuff, and signage at the site. They want to improve the signage that's at the site that draws people in, and then also the interpretive signage. So those are kind of like a one-time thing. Granted, there's some upkeep of those things, but the ongoing piece of it, which I really appreciate that perspective, because that's the world that I work in too, and think of how are we going to keep this maintained and so forth. Is that the Clackamas Heritage Partners goal is that there's going to be some revenue generation that will be created, and that will be what keeps the programmatic side of things going. The physical part of it, that's the grants are kind of the one-time get something either started or a physical piece or what have you. But they've definitely scaled down significantly the overhead that they used to have, because that concern was at the forefront of a number of our city commissioners in the discussion as well. What's different? Why is there going to be a different outcome? And that was what CHP's response was, is they don't even have an executive director anymore. They used to pay a full-time exec director. They had a number of staff. They have a very small amount of basically part-time staff. Their board is all volunteer. So they've taken everything and really gone back to kind of basic level and just trying to do that. So again, I'm not speaking for them. I'm just telling you what their responses were, just so you know. That's because that's a really good point.
So, is there way to put those into words? This is a really nice way you put that, and I appreciate your perspective, big time, Bob. It sounds like, at least from this is third party information. I apologize for not being there. I myself, as a resident and a committee member person, would like to see a plan that actually goes more than just providing an amenity. And actually, is it going to be revenue neutral, or is there even an effort to get some revenue out of that site? That's a very prime piece of real estate right there. And I guarantee that's why some of the parties that were mentioned are involved. And
Well put.
yeah, and I could see standing and watching Rome burn just for the opportunity. So my concern is, are we just buying? I mean, $80,000 is just a splash. That's not going to do anything.
Right.
What's the 2-5-year, the 3-5-year plan, and when's this thing going to really become an asset and not a liability? And I don't expect you to answer that, but when I talk to people about that place, that's what they're thinking. There's a lost revenue opportunity there, and I'm all for respect for heritage and history and all the significance of Oregon City as far as that's concerned. But we're talking about money, and I come from a for-profit. I run a nonprofit, but my background is recreation for-profit, and I haven't heard anything yet. And I know you guys just kind of sat in on that meeting. That sounds aggressive enough to satisfy me. Sounds pretty passive. I just want to make that my comment.
I think that's That's another good viewpoint. It's a I guess it's a values question that's what your point is really good. That's exactly what the city has been grappling with, is what the site is going to be, what it how it's going to look and feel, and whether it's going to be a revenue producing thing, whether it's the importance is just that it represent the end of the Oregon Trail is and that story is told, or whether we go beyond that. I mean, it's a values question that the city has to determine what it wants to do there, for sure. Yeah, I mean that, and just to make real clear, this arrangement that we're talking about right now is was very intentionally directed that it would be a short-term arrangement with the potential to extend that, but with the potential to have other conversations about it and not bypass the funds that are being put forth or offered to the city, but with the idea that we can continue to have this conversation. And I mean, it's clearly just it's a values question about what that site is for the city to make that decision. And just by the fact that the city commission said let's do these things right now is not the future forever and ever of that hasn't been determined. So just to make that clear as well. But there's definitely some movement in certain directions.
I think that point you made, that the future has yet to be made clear, is exactly my point.
Yep.
Question?
Yeah.
Does CHP have a contract with the city? Or what's their authority for managing? There is a contract now?
No.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Well, they have. That's what the commission asked us to do, would be to draft a contract with them and bring it back for their approval. Right now, they don't have any contract with the city. What they have is it's a little, try to keep this without being confusing. The city owns, so the visitor center that it is operating right now is actually owned by the city, that building, and it's part of the grounds. However, that was built with funds and with the intention that are basically from the source of tourism dollars that come from hotel motel tax, which we have a pretty limited amount of in our city, and also from some state tourism dollars that come kind of trickle in it's a state visitor center. Okay, so the county has a contract with the city to operate the visitor center. It's the city's building, it's a city site, but we have a contract with Clackamas County that allows them to run the visitor center, and that's been in place for a long time. They subsequently contract with CHP to be the operator of the visitor center, and that was an agreement that was made because they were already on the site and they had the staffing that kind of carried over from when they were there before. So even though CHP ceased to operate the interpretive center, and our agreement with CHP has been terminated. It was terminated when they stopped operating the interpretive center. So they have an agreement. It's a three-party deal.
Okay.
In an indirect way, they kind of have an agreement with the city, but basically they're a subcontractor of the county to run
Okay.
the visitor center operation.
That's a good way of putting it.
The city doesn't really dictate who the county hires to run the visitor center. That's up to them, and that's been discussed. And really, that's if we give it to the county to run, and the city doesn't want to be in the business of running that visitor center. The funds come through the county. It's their thing, and that was built just for that purpose. So there's really no reason. It would be a funding problem for the city to try to interject into the visitor center unless we wanted to take over the staffing and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if that makes sense, how I'm explaining that. So CHP does not have a specific contract right now with the city to do anything with the interpretive center part of that operation. And we've been asked by the commission to work towards that agreement. And we're going to be bringing back a draft agreement pretty soon.
So then, it sounds like one of your comments earlier that we would be developing a plan for the center. Who would approve that? The county? Or our commission?
No,
Or how
the
would
city
that-
commission would.
The city commission would approve it absent permission or authority from the county. They wouldn't intervene at all?
No, that's correct. The county has really nothing to do with the interpretive center part of well, they really don't have, the only thing that the county has anything to do with on that site is the Visitors Information Center. So the city would maintain, though we would be entering into this contract, this agreement, which details are still having to be worked out here, we'd be entering into this agreement with CHP, but we would still maintain all authority over that site. So the city still has the right to, say what goes on there. We're not giving up anything per se. We're just working out an arrangement. It's a partnership arrangement that allows another agency to do some programming in the building, and also to work on helping us, make some investments at the site. Like I said, with some signage, and we're even talking about trying to come up with a way to partner on getting those hoops cleaned and painted. The rust has completely overtaken those, and just doing that would really brighten up the site a lot. So we're talking about those kinds of things. So is that a clear answer to your question, Bob? I don't know if it makes sense to me, because I work in it all the time.
I
But
can see in the way I think, it's pretty murky. But the county has a piece, but not all of it. The CHP had their own, as I listened, their own set of goals, the things they wanted to accomplish. They talked about fixing up the hoops and even having Home Depot donate the labor and the paint.
Right.
I mean, that was part of that conversation. So they've given a lot of thought to this. It'll take me a while to figure out who's on first here. I've dealt with enough contracts to know that until you can really touch all sides, then you've got more thinking to do.
Yep.
Scott, you said that the fifth one of those points of agreement had to do with starting some deferred maintenance, that kind of.
Right.
Okay, I guess that's the one that concerns me, because Don's right. $81,000 is nothing.
No.
And
Paint.
whatever goes, to programming and to try to have something happening there, that's great. Something's better than nothing. But I guess what worries me is the city's liability. They come along, and I don't know what kind of, if the city has veto power or whatever over how any of that is spent, but they come along and decide, okay, we're gonna replace the roof on this building, and somebody comes in and tears it off, and the money's gone. Now it falls back on the city again, and it's more of an urgency because maybe something's opened up, and more becomes more of a financial liability to the city if this agreement doesn't work out, or if it ends at the end of 2013.
So, excellent point. So the approach that we're trying to look at is, without any kind of a long-range commitment at this point, because we're talking about just an agreement through 2013, not over-investing into the facility improvements part of it until we know more where we're going, doing just some basic things. For now, those buildings are there, and even at a basic level of just kind of being mothballed, they still have to be maintained, and we still have to do some things. So if we can capture some of these grant funds with a partnering group like CHP that says, well, you guys have to do something with some of the buildings anyway, we've got to keep them structurally sound until we get a direction to do something different with them, and we have that responsibility right now. But the point about what you're making, and I think it's an excellent point, we're not gonna jump too far into the facilities thing in terms of the really, really big dollar things until we would know more where we're going after the end of 2013. What we've been talking about are some of the basic things that it would take just to get the doors back open. Like I said, I mentioned some of the ADA things and a little bit of touch-up paint or some things like that, but nothing. I mean, the roof project, we're not talking about tearing the roof off and putting a new one on. We're talking about doing a shoring up that we can at least have it be secure from the elements. We're already kind of in a little bit of a compromising situation there with that. It's getting to the point where we've got to do something with that. And so we're trying to take the approach of we have to look at it short term and then be thinking about where we're going long term and not investing a bunch of money and getting into something where let's just do the whole roof and we get in there and we realize our $50,000 project is all of a sudden is a $200,000 project.
Yeah.
We're being really careful and thoughtful about that. That's a really good point.
And to clarify,
Is CHP being really careful and cautious about that?
Yes. I mean, they're not. Ultimately, I guess the way.
More hesitation there.
Can't answer that.
Well, I have to. I can't speak for them, so I
Right.
don't want to be like I'm not their
And
representative.
I guess
That's what
that's
my-
my concern, is that they spend part of that grant money on part of a project, and the bulk of which lands back on the city's nose again.
Correct. Right now, though, the thing is, we're in that position already, regardless
Right.
of CHP or not. I mean, we're
Understood.
when CHP basically, in essence, what the technical term is, they defaulted on their agreement with the city because they were unable to continue operating that, and that agreement then became null and it was voided, and everything defaulted back to the city. The management agreement with CHP basically said if CHP is ever not able to continue running this, everything comes back to the city. We've been in that position for 2 years. We've been putting money into keeping those buildings at least in a really basic mothballed state. We have to protect our asset to at least a minimum level until we know what we're doing. But without trying to do that without making any gigantic investment or anything like that. So, I don't think. I understand where you're going with that. And again, I can't speak for CHP. These are good questions. Maybe it'd be good to ask the representatives of CHP to come to one of your next meetings so you can kind of hear it directly from them.
yeah, it'd be great.
I'd be more than happy, and I'm sure Dan and maybe other board members would be more than happy to come and talk to you, because I think they need investment from everybody, and PRAC is a big part of this. And so if you're uncomfortable with some of this, you should have a conversation as well and get your. I don't want to answer their questions, I guess, but I'm trying to interpret what I know based on the conversations that I've been involved with. Yeah. So.
Well, this is my concern, and that I mean, the crux of it is they defaulted on their prior agreement. In my mind, and there's also something, let me go back a little bit. If I understood what you said before, there's basically an agreement with a tenant, but the tenant gets to sublet, even though the tenant's already failed once before. I'm not really concerned with who's running it now versus who was running it then. The reality is, as a taxpayer, that asset's sitting there still. We're now going to go back to the dance with the dance partner that left the party, and they get the ability to sublet without oversight, kind of. So what I got out of that, is that correct?
No, oversight is going to be, there will be oversight. You're talking about the interpretive building part of this or the visitor center?
The interpretive part.
No, there was clear direction from the city commission that they want, that part is going to be a lot different than it used to be. The former management agreement, and frankly just our working arrangement, was that organization was running the place. We had, it was ours. The city still owned it and was ultimately responsible. But the arrangement was always that a nonprofit organization would would form, which it did over time, and would run the facility, and that the city would kind of just let them do that. And the difference now is that, and the commission was making a lot of the same points and asking a lot of the same questions that you guys are asking right now, made it clear that they want us to maintain pretty significant oversight at what's going on, and it's not just going to be, here's the keys, go do what you want to do. That's not what the arrangement will be. And that ultimately the agreement will spell out exactly what, you know, the details of that will be. But it was clear from the commission they wanted a different way of working with this, and they wanted to proceed cautiously. The commission wanted, they are, you know, on one level they're supportive of doing something, because frankly right now nobody else is offering to run anything there. So it's just, you know, it's sort of visitors come and want some kind of an experience, and there's nothing there other than the visitor center. So that part is, you know, at least somebody can do something. The city does not have the staff or the resources to do anything right now. So, you know, that part of it, but that there's definitely a sense of caution.
So when they mention the word contract, that would imply competition maybe. Is there anybody else has any other organization come forward with an interest to run that, for-profit or non-profit? Is anybody else in that circle yet, or can you talk about that now?
Without going back, and that would get into when we did that visioning plan in 2010. There was an effort to reach out and say, if anybody has an interest in, you know, making a proposal, then go ahead and bring something forward.
But that defaulted. The proposal that came from that was approved and they ran with fell apart.
No,
That would have been before.
that was before that. The 2010 visioning plan was after the doors closed. Now the city was basically saying, now what do we do? So we did a visioning study and had a community discussion. That's that plan I was referring to earlier. So I'd refer you to that. There was a little bit of interest on. We got one. I don't want to get into like details, and again, I'd be happy to maybe talk a little bit more offline or whatever. There was one for-profit entity that wanted to do some things. I don't think that the commission saw that as being part of what they envisioned at the site. So not a lot of interest, frankly. There was not a lot of groups saying, yeah, we'll take it and run it. And so that's kind of where we're at right now.
Scott, did you mention before I arrived that they've refashioned their board of directors? I suppose you already mentioned that. And they wanted somebody off the city commission to be a board member? Mm-hmm. I guess it's redundant, but...
And that's a new thing since, you know, what previously there was not a city commissioner was not on the board, so yeah.
That ought to help with communication at least, and making sure that they don't wander off unattended.
Exactly. That's part of, I think that gets to part of your concerns or what your points are, Don, is more involvement, more oversight by the city, and working cautiously into this arrangement. So.
And Scott, there's a phase, just clarifying question, phase 1, phase 2 parts. This 81,000 and the CHP's interest is for both these phases, or is this one specific part of the phase, the first part of the phase?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by the phases. I'm sorry.
Well, aren't there two phases that they want to work on with the Oregon Trail? There's working on the first wagon and then the second wagons after that. Is it broken up into phases?
Well, I guess the way I would say it, it would be more that they're wanting to do some. They're wanting to do some programming. Doesn't have to necessarily do with which of the wagons it's in or whatever, but they definitely want to. I'm talking about CHP. They're wanting to ease into the programming, not just go, let's throw the doors open
The whole
and go
thing.
full bore and
Right.
and all that stuff. There is definitely
List.
an approach to how we would get back into programming the facility. So
Okay.
yeah, it's not just jumping in and swing the doors open and everything's running full bore like it was before. That's not where this is at.
Okay.
It's a limited amount of programming compared to what it used to be. So I guess saying phasing, but that would be over time. I think their goal would be to continue to grow that, but they definitely heard from the commission that we want to take a conservative approach and work slowly with this and see how it goes for a while. We'll do this first short-term agreement for about 18 months. It'll have an expiration at the end of 2013. We'll see how it's going, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Okay.
And that doesn't rule out any other potential partnerships or groups, maybe multiple, whatever. It doesn't rule anything out, I guess is what I'd say.
Yeah, I was just referring to Oregon Live. They kind of spell out what's going on in an article, and they break it up into 2 phases. So
Okay.
the part you described, they describe as phase 1 of the process, and then phase 2 would be tackling the other buildings and finishing
That
out.
makes sense.
Thank you.
What's our job going to be? What's our responsibility in this?
I think you can.
Are we charged with any
Well,
particular?
No, maybe this is something a little bit to touch on with your report to the commission as well. Is we're here to don't forget about us. We're your sounding board for issues, and my job is to keep you informed of what's going on and give you the opportunity to do what you want with that information. Whether that's just working through some things here and asking me to forward on information from you to the commission. Whether you want to go directly and talk to the commission, that's what part of the point of this annual report is. Make sure that you're telling the commission, here we are, don't forget us, and we're working on things, and on bigger issues like this issue with the EOT site. The commission didn't specifically charge PRAC with anything. They know that I keep you posted or informed, and if you've got part of your job too is if you want to convey information, concerns or questions or support for something like we've done, at recent meetings where you've conveyed your support for some projects, and there's a way that we end up doing that through, I write a letter of support for those agencies, or the groups that were here to do the projects for the Metro Enhancement Grants. You said, we pledge our support for the year, you gave your support. So then I write a letter that says the Parks and Rec Committee has supported this, and that goes into the application process or something. I'm just giving you a for example. With bigger things like this, there are different ways that over time that the committee has communicated with the commission. I mean, it's actually an interesting question, because sometimes the commission will specifically request a response from one of the boards. Sometimes they just figure that if you have a concern, you'll convey that, and that's my job, is to help you make sure that you're communicating with the commission as you wish. So you tell me is kind of what I'm saying. If you have.
It just, if I was to try to summarize your comment and yours, Bob, and my own and yours, that it sounds like that historically support or not support, from this committee is really what they're looking for. But we don't know anything about what they're doing. Let's just put it this way: they haven't really got a clear idea of what they're doing. Pardon that slip. And I think if I was to tell my neighbor what was going on, I'd really need a lot more information before I could decide whether I'm in favor of it or not. Right now, I think the concern is it's really
I
vague.
think your mic's turned off, Don.
So that's probably a good thing. It's vague, and I think that's the consensus here. Is it sounds really vague, and it sounds like we're maybe could possibly make the same mistake again. And I'm just speaking, I'm just trying to say, what would the PrAC committee's position be on this? If it's even
I don't
relevant.
think we can make a stand yet. We don't have enough information to go one way or the other. I think that is our position. We want and need. It's important to the. I think it's important to the PrAC. It's important to the city. It's almost embarrassing now when people come from out of the area, and they come and they see these closed buildings, and we could do so much better for our city. And I think that's all of our citizens. That's why we're on this board, is to, help be proud of our city and the stuff it has to offer. So you definitely would like to continue to get more information on this. This is a big deal to the city.
One of our goals from 2011, goal number 7, was work with the city in the process for determining the use of the end of the Oregon Trail interpretive site. So that last year it was, you thought that was...
Yeah, and it's on this year's goals
Yeah,
as
great.
well. And it is something that I was going to mention in that presentation
Yeah.
to the commission. Maybe what we want to do is rework that, and I'm thinking out loud, but something more along the lines of, if the commission is interested in PrAC's opinion on the direction that the way things seem to be going, we don't feel like we have enough information at this point to provide that information, and members of the committee have serious concerns about what we've heard so far.
And how can we help?
And how can we help? Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Does that express the concerns?
How can we help was perfect.
And just to make real clear the point, there hasn't been a lot of discussion at the commission level about this. That work session a few weeks ago was the first time they've really taken that subject on in about a year and a half. They, in the 2011 commission goals, and if you go back and read those, the last year's goals, the commission goals I'm talking about, they deferred this discussion for a year, and it actually, I think it said that in their goals that they wanted to take that on next year specifically, which is now this year. And then they reaffirmed that in their 2012 goals. They said, okay, this is the second year. They deferred it last year, the discussion, because of a number of other pressing issues and priorities that they had on their plate. So you're right. It's not crystal clear. This is still a work in progress, and even the commission is still, I think they're still working around how to think through this exactly. There's been this agency, this organization that is interested in doing something right now, and they've definitely pursued that independently with the city commission. Said, we really want to do this. They went out and got some funds and said, we have some money to do some things. Can we do that? Do we have your permission? And that's really what this work session became about, was kind of deciding, do we go forward now and do something at least at a minimal level, or do we not? And they, at the end of that conversation, that's where the direction was, well, at least we're going to do this much right now. So, but the point I wanted to make was, there haven't been, you have as much information as I know. There haven't been any other, commission meetings or something. There's no other subcommittee thing going on or what have you. Really, the discussion on this got put back a while, and has just started coming to kind of back on the front burner again.
So at that
Just so you
meeting,
understand the process part of it.
did they discuss numbers at all? Like, what's it costing to keep that property alive the way that it is? Did anybody talk about economic opportunity cost in the current use? Is that the highest and best use? Has there been any other suggestions? I mean, we can draw. It's a way beyond probably what we could talk about in this meeting. But those are my concerns.
That stuff is discussed. Those exact points are in that 2010 visioning plan. The idea of for example, one of the major recommendations of the outcomes of that visioning plan was to create a festival. What's the right word I'm looking for? An events center.
Yeah.
For example, a
Amphitheater.
That's what it was alluding me,
As it
and
should be.
and have major concert events, not little ones, but big ones. You know,
Yeah.
and there's already been some talk of that. Actually,
Easy.
there's some radio stations that the big ones in the Portland market that want to do a major concert kind of a series thing, and they said Oregon City is one of our prime target areas. It's you know.
Totally agree.
So
Me too.
Yes. So Don, that has been spoken of, and it was an outcome. It was one of the major recommendations in that 2010 visioning plan that there was a committee and a consultant that put this plan together. So I would refer you to at least read the executive summary of that. There's the whole report is pretty lengthy, and it's a long read. The executive summary is maybe 15 or 20 pages, but it gets pretty quick to here's the major recommendations, and those are exactly the types of things that are talked about. So those are there, and I reminded the commission that we're working with that information and that knowledge that this report was done and given to you, and the commission asked for that work to be done, and it was presented, and we can't lose sight of that. So those are some things that are there, and actually CHP has spoken to some of those kind of things and would like to help promote the goals there, like help do a major festival and summer concert series and big farmers markets or big markets of some type, or community activities that become kind of like a festival type atmosphere that generate funds. And but one thing we have to keep in mind, though, as a public park agency, our goal is not to be a profit center per se. If we can do things that generate revenue that go back and support our mission, then that's a good thing. But ultimately our mission as a public recreation agency is to provide opportunities to our community and to find ways to keep those opportunities funded. So it all does come back together. But
Can I say that in a nonprofit, real quick, that they do call a profit excess revenue after expenses that goes back into programming? So that's the way we should look at it, as excess revenue. I would love to be a part of that.
It seems too that we're setting ourselves up to continue a path that hasn't really worked. It looks like we're just repeating something that wasn't successful and wasn't sustainable, and we as a city should be thinking about making a change from that path, to something new, something that can be sustainable and profitable and taking care of its own funding. I just hope that we can go that direction.
So you think it's appropriate for his notes to include our concerns?
most definitely.
Okay, great.
I think your timing of this discussion with the fact that you're giving that report in a couple of weeks is perfect, because that's your one time per year that you specifically have set aside to go and talk to the commission about what's going on. But also, you can the Parks Committee can go in front of the City Commission for specific issues or concerns that come up at any time. So I just want to encourage you to keep that in mind, that you're this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing, is looking at things through different lenses. There's a pretty good cross section of types of interests and backgrounds, and lots of great experiences here on this committee. I think this Parks Committee is just outstanding. I mean, I look across and think about all your different, where you're all coming from in terms of as a citizen, or what you do professionally or in other parts of your life, and you look at it from different lenses, with different lenses and from different perspectives. And I guess to summarize what I'm saying is, please express what you're saying if you feel inclined to do so to the City Commission. They need to hear from you, and I can help you do that. You've got a great forum coming up in 2 weeks to do that. But there's other ways too, at different parts of the year. But this one's moving, so they had that one meeting and there were some definite outcomes, and it's going to be moving relatively quickly. So I think timing is of the essence, which is why that report to the commission is really, the timing is great on that. So definitely.
One more comment. During that meeting, it occurred to me that there were two commissioners that really had a background in this. The others were silent. Now, I'm not sure if they were silent because they didn't understand, didn't know all the history, or they just didn't want to talk that night. But two of them spoke up. The rest of them sat silently and listened. I assumed they didn't have adequate background, pretty much like we are, but that could be a faulty assumption. And you would know, Scott, better than I, for sure. Which means to me they're it might be in a position where our input might do some good if people aren't really anchored in their own particular positions.
I don't want to keep belaboring this, but I have one more question as I'm sitting here thinking. Again, it goes back to the grant process. And usually when you write grants and request funds, you have approval from the people that you are seeking location to implement the funds. So kind of the fact that and maybe this is incorrect, but what I'm hearing is that they went out and sought a grant without permission from the city and then are coming back and saying, we'd like to spend the funds here. Good.
They did ask permission first.
I just wanted to
Okay,
make,
good point, and I didn't mention that. I think I would have to go back and look at our minutes of these meetings. I hope that I did, and if I neglected to do so at some point, then I apologize. Clackamas Heritage Partners came before the City Commission in January with a request, and it was a very quick request because they were coming up on a timeline. They had this opportunity to apply for this funding. It's actually through the Lennox Foundation. I should just tell you that. It's the Lennox Foundation, and somebody on that board had a connection with the Lennox Foundation and said, we've got a really good opportunity. They felt confident that they could get these funds. It's the Lennox, as in the heating company, but they have a foundation. They came to a city commission meeting in early January. They had 10 days before the application deadline and said, can we ask the city for permission to go forth in this grant because it's on your property. We want to, obviously we'd need your support. The commission said yes, and then if you get the grant, come back and let's talk. But it was a pretty quick. I think there wasn't a lot of time to process that. It came to them really quickly. Staff didn't really even have much time to even respond to that or give any recommendations because it all happened really, really fast. I wasn't even at that city commission meeting. I was one of the few that I missed. I was on sort of part of the tail end of my winter break. I took a vacation time, and they actually came at that meeting. I knew they were coming, but I didn't even really have time to. It happened quickly, but they did do that.
Okay.
And I don't think I mentioned that tonight. I don't remember. I think I might have mentioned that in passing or in a staff report or something to you guys. But it's possible that I didn't even mention that. It's kind of like, well, see what happens.
That's okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
And
so
that is
glad
somewhat
you-
fortunate and unfortunate because usually when you apply for a grant, you don't want to have to give the money back. So you really, really want to have your plan in place before you even request that kind of money. So kind of, would have been nice to have that done ahead of time.
Is that record, can we get a hold of that grant and read it
Oh, absolutely.
and find out what the conditions were?
Sure.
And that's where?
I've got copies of it that I can email, or if you want
Nice,
hard
thanks.
copies or whatever, yeah.
Email would be great, thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to see it too. And so I will. We've probably beat this one moderately. Okay, all right, we're just getting started. But I will make sure that the comments that I make reflect PrAC's healthy skepticism or concern or doubt or
Suspicion.
it's just it feels like and followed by we want to help. What can we do? Because this feels like a placeholder or a stopgap or whatever. Yeah.
Well, one
We'll do
final
it.
question I have
Yes.
for you, just to get some, so definitely where you're going there in terms of taking that to the commission as part of your report is great. Do you want me to invite Clackamas Heritage Partners to come to a PrAC meeting so that you can ask them these questions? Because I feel a little uncomfortable trying to interpret and answer their questions. I'll provide you the grant application that was done, and it's clear what their objectives are and spelled out. Maybe you don't want it to be that, I don't want to put you in a weird position, but I don't know if that would help you to hear it directly from them, what they're thinking and how they're wanting to go about this, so that you can have some better information, because that's what they did at the commission meeting, was spoke to their own application and their own intentions and their objectives. Hearing it from them directly, if you were at that meeting, you would have gotten that flavor pretty strongly of what maybe you'd prefer not, and it wouldn't be.
I don't think we should.
No.
You don't think
Really?
we should? I was thinking if we read the grant, and then maybe if we should just watch the tape,
That's
the
a great
archive,
idea.
and that way we don't have to.
I think that we run the risk of appearing like we are, ill-informed.
Yeah.
And it would be a history lesson back and forth, and I really don't want to get into a confrontation when I'm not even really, when I'm ill-equipped. That's kind of how I feel about it. And I think it goes back to that idea number 8, where we really want to know more of what everybody else is trying to do so that we can be helpful.
Right.
The thing I'm trying to word for you?
So maybe we all want to see the grant application first, and then we would decide whether or not we think it's that we want to hear from them.
And hear from the
That's
city
fine.
commissioners too, what's their feelings
Yes.
as well.
Okay.
Well, I learned a lot from the presentation, but I can live with just reading the grant application, see what that says. But I was impressed with the level of detail, coming from it as a novice in this, so
The level of detail of their
the
presentation.
presentation to the commission.
Now, that's not recorded, right? Because that was executive session?
No, it was a work session, so that is
Oh.
recorded.
Yeah.
Yes, so that meeting is on our web
So it
stream.
will be on the website?
We need to
Yes.
watch that.
So that's our homework.
Okay.
Watch
That's
that.
that's your homework.
Yeah, I would encourage you
Okay,
to do
watch
that.
that and read the grant application.
Strongly
Then we'll figure
encourage
out
you
where
to
to
do
go from
that.
there.
Yeah, that's a great
Okay.
point.
Good idea. Anything else on that topic? Anything else on other general business? Okay, PrAC member reports. Lisa?
I just want to say a public recognition to the Oregon City Optimist Club for the work that they do at, they just did the cleanup at the Tots Park, Bloom Tots Park, just up the street. They did a bunch of, they did mulch and they planted and they trim up the bushes and they really take on that park and do it 2 or 3 times a year where they really clean it up and take that load off of Larry, and just the cemetery cleanup as well. They did one, I believe, last month, and Larry's very helpful, and the JROTC comes and helps, and the Optimist gentlemen come, and I think we have a great partnership with them, and I really appreciate that.
Thank
I know
you for
what they do.
mentioning that. Appreciate that.
Done.
While you're on that subject, I don't know if it was mentioned, but if it was, I think it deserves to be mentioned again. The catastrophe was really well done. I think it was, I live right in the middle of all that. And I think it was probably one of the best managed potential crises that I've ever seen. And to all those who were part of that, hats off, admirable job.
Yeah,
It wasn't
that's for
me,
sure.
my department. It was our Public Works department, and I'll pass your comments on, because I'm sure they love hearing things like that. So, yeah.
And if you haven't looked at the little time-lapse video that's on that Jug Handle website, it's very cool. The actual bridge move is like, and it's in place, it's like, what happened? All the rest of the time, they're getting dirt out of the way, and then zoom, here comes the bridge. So that was very impressive. The only thing I'll say is, it struck me again on my way here. I drove down the hill past Singer Creek Park, and given the fact that it's the middle of May and we've had a rotten spring, it's amazing what Larry and his crew can do. I mean, that park is gorgeous. this early in the year with coming out of the winter that we've had. So they just do a phenomenal job. That's going to be, that's how I'm going to end my report to the commission, but I wanted to say it again. They just do a great job.
And I'll pass that along as well. I'm sure they'd love to hear that. So
Please
thank
do.
you.
And I got a up-to-the-minute report from Kathy Weisman from the Pioneer Center, and she said that within the month, or just within the last month, they gave a volunteer recognition to over 100 volunteers showed up, and this is to thank them for their work with the senior companions who visit seniors in their own homes on a regular basis, and then also for the TRP, Transportation Reaching People assistance, so that people are not homebound so much. And the staff are currently working on putting together some new training implementations for new volunteers on all of their programs. Clackamas County's contractor, and I think this is through Oregon Project Independence, but anyway, they requested the help of the Pioneer Center staff to train at Malala Center. And it's specifically Shirley Ryan, who is the manager of the meal program, and Jamie Davey, who's the client services case manager. But it's because they have in place systems, procedures, forms, documentations that are so highly thought of by the rest of the county that they want to see them implemented in other newer centers. And then next week, for something new, they're going to add a new program that's called Hike, H-I-K-E, and it's offering guided hikes once a month to the physically abled seniors. And the program for the younger senior population, this first program is going to be over to Talbot Park, and they're going to end up at the Ram for lunch. Lots of good rewards, but I think it should entice more people to really feel that the Pioneer Center is part of what they are accessing and paying for.
Great. Thank you. Patrick?
Not much. Just a shout out for also, you were talking about Richard Bloom Tot Park and the mulch laying that was going on there, but also there's a group of mothers that goes and weeds and keeps the little Tot Park pesticide free. Now I know it's just a small little smidgen of a park compared to all of our big, huge parks, but what's really amazing to see is local people organizing to take care of a park. It's beautiful to see. It would be nice. I've seen a couple pesticide-free little signs in people's yards, and it'd be really cool if they got a sign in that park. I think that's a great, not just an advertisement, not to drive Larry crazy, thinking all parks need to be pesticide-free, because I know what the undertaking that entails, but it's kind of like a tribute, a reward to those people who go out and show an effort into making a difference in their park, pitching in. So maybe I'll talk to you about that. If there's a way they could flip a sign in there, it'd be really cool.
Yeah, we can talk about that for sure.
Bob?
I think I gave my report
Yeah.
already about the end of the trail and made the comments I wanted to make there. I did add just one question, though. Who owns that coffee shack out there?
Oh.
Is that ours?
Yeah.
Is it city?
It's
Is
not
that-
ours. No, it's a private owner operator, and actually, there's some. That's been an interesting situation because they were under the. They were working under the management of the Clackamas Heritage Partners when CHP was managing the entire center, as we've talked about. And they had, under that management agreement, they had the authority to subcontract with vendors that would support, and provide. Well, when that stopped being an agreement with the city, then that operator was there operating kind of under a loose arrangement with the city, and it's become pretty complicated. And
Who gets the money from it?
There is no money right now. In
Nothing.
fact, they're in the process of moving off the site.
Yeah.
The challenge is that here's the long story short. The operator that vendor has been there for a number of years. Never had the approved land use permits that are required. It's not hooked up to any utilities. There's a number of things I won't tell you. I won't tell you all the details. I'd be happy to share those if you want them. Let me know. Never had gained that. So when it reverted to becoming the city's issue to attend to that arrangement, we discovered that there were no permits in place, and we basically said to the operator, "You're going to have to pursue getting those in order to discuss entering into an agreement with the city." And he determined that he didn't want to pursue that. It was too cost prohibitive, and one thing led to another. At any rate, basically, the city is in the process of asking him to not be there anymore. And it's gotten kind of dicey legally. We've gotten tangled up a little bit. It's an unfortunate situation. I can tell you more in an executive session if you'd like to know.
Thank you.
Okay. Brian?
Not much report. Just I've been trying to get out this spring to parks in the city that I haven't been to. So Waterboard Park for the first time.
Isn't
So
that awesome?
just didn't know what I'm in charge of. Kind of.
Yeah, it's amazing when you see all those sites.
That's it.
Okay. Staff reports.
Okay. Let's see.
Kanema Park.
Kenema Park, just keep reminding you and plugging this, June 14th from 5 to 7. Everything is still a go, and you'll actually we're in the process right now of putting together some formal invitations. You'll be getting, probably in the mail and electronically, you'll be getting a couple different versions of a formal invitation. So if you're able to make that, we'd certainly love to have our Parks Committee represented well at that event. The Rivercrest restroom, this is just an informational piece for you. We have applied for, through our state parks local government grant funding opportunity, we've applied for basically the renovation of that restroom at Rivercrest Park. It's about 50 years old, I think, is what we've ascertained, and it is desperately in need of being fixed and basically kind of redone completely. Especially what's happened is the impact on that restroom has been dramatically increased since we opened that spray park there a few years ago. And so we're trying to leverage some limited funds that we have available with our state government grant program that we've been successful in getting grants for the John Storm Park. Actually, we built part of the spray park there originally at Rivercrest with some of these funds. What are the other projects that we've done? It just vaporized on me. Anyway, we've had some success with this grant opportunity. So we've put in. We'll probably know something later this summer, and if we were going to do that, we'd be redoing that bathroom for the 2013 operating season. It would be done before then. So the Ermitinger House, just continuing to keep you updated on that. That was the other topic that was on the commission work session a couple weeks ago on May 8th. I'd also tell you, if you're going to go back and watch that meeting, you might want to tune into that. The architect and engineering consultant that we have working on that project gave a really good presentation about the project, the PowerPoint that would show up on the video if you choose to go back and watch that. Basically, what we did was gave the commission an update about the progress that we've made on the renovation plans. We're continuing to put together a funding package. I can tell you it's official now, just as of just very recently, that we've received another grant from, we received $140,000 from the Community Development Block Grant Program which is administered through Clackamas County. We've been working on that for some time. So another pretty big chunk of the funding towards the restoration of the house. Let's see, recreation stuff. Denise isn't here to talk about all that. I was going to mention a couple of quick things. The spray parks at both Carnegie and Rivercrest have been opened as of last week. Usually we shoot for opening those on Memorial Weekend. We got them open a week early because it was like 87 degrees last week, and we turned them on and this happened. So, but it is.
Well, they were well used for several
Yeah,
days.
they
At least
were.
They were packed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of happy folks because
Yes.
we got them up and running
I was one.
a couple weeks sooner than usual, and then it rained, but it's supposed to be nice again pretty soon here. So both of those are up and running for the season. Let's see. I was going to mention. Sorry, I'm looking back and forth between my notes I've got on my computer here. I wanted to tell you a really quick thing about the Pioneer Center. This cool thing that happened, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. We have this program at the Pioneer Center. It's a county-wide program through different senior centers called Animeals, and I think Kathy's probably talked to you about that in some of her reports. Where we've got the homebound seniors that get the Meals on Wheels, and then over time, what the Meals on Wheels program has discovered was a lot of these folks that are receiving the Meals on Wheels are taking parts of their meals and feeding their animals because they have these pets that are beloved and they can't afford to go out and buy them dog food or cat food. Well, somewhere along the way, the Animeals program was created where it's a pet food program mostly for older adults and for homebound folks and so forth, where funds are raised or donations are received to give people pet food to feed their pets. So it's just kind of an ongoing thing. So last week or a couple of weeks ago, a young lady showed up at the Pioneer Center one day, and it was a 10-year-old girl. Her name's Riley Palmer. She and her mother came to the Pioneer Center just out of the blue and dropped off a humongous donation of cat food, basically would be like a shopping cart or 2 shopping carts full. Riley turned 10, and instead of getting presents for herself, she asked her guests to give her bags of cat food. And she had read or heard about the Animeals program in the newspaper or somewhere, and understood that people really needed some help with this. And so she asked her friends to bring to her birthday party bags of cat food. She collected a humongous amount of it and brought it and presented it to the Pioneer Center. And it was just one of those really cool stories I wanted to share with you. So that was really cool. We have a photo of the young lady. I should send that to you. If her making that donation, I'll do that. And then, let's see, 2 more things real quick. We have this coming Monday is Memorial Day, as you all I'm sure know. We have an annual event at our Mountain View Cemetery. It's at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's about an hour, and it's a really great Memorial Day event that our cemetery and park staff put together. We have a number of speakers, dignitary types of speakers. Our mayor is going to be speaking. We have I think there's some other elected representatives coming. There's some really cool things that take place. Then after that's over, there's some food and activities and things going on, and it's just a really, really great event. So again, that's 10 o'clock on Monday morning. We even get a flyover from some of our military that do flyovers around some of the cemeteries in the Portland area, and they give us a flyover over our cemetery as well. And then the last thing is that just a mention to you that we've had a lot of flooding on the Clackamas and Willamette River. At Clackamas Park, we had done some planting that was part of the John Storm planting, and also there was some mitigation planting done from Sportcraft because we had to remove some trees and take out some plants. And some mitigation planting was done a little bit downriver at Clackamet. Well, a lot of that got wiped out. And so we've been working with our landscaping contractor to replace some of that planting basically along the river frontage at Clackamet Park, and that's taking place right now, just to mention that. But yeah, when we get those floods, it doesn't just cause us to shut down the park, but it does some damage. And in this case, it took out some of it was some of our mandated mitigation planning for the Sportcraft project, that a bunch of our brand new plantings got wiped out, and we had to get that remedied. So some replanting is being done, and that's all I've got.
Okay.
No, it's always amazing. I just rode over that bridge today over the Clackamas on my bicycle, and it's amazing to me that when the water level comes back down, how many plants are still out there in the middle of the river. Where were they, you know?
Some of them are pretty hardy.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, our next meeting is Thursday, June 28th, and we'll adjourn the meeting at 8:56.
Wow.
We did it.
Thank you.